Make sure my phone's off. Hold on, let me. Welcome to the SaveOne podcast, where we share testimonials of overcoming inner turmoil and tackle the tough topic of common mental health struggles. Our goal is to create a community of believers who support each other through camaraderie, understanding, and love by revealing the secrets we so frequently try to hide from others. You are never alone. Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you're all doing good. We got Miss Jacquie Taylor with us today. So we're going to finish our three-part series today. And so today is going to be all about navigating divorce. And I've thought a lot about how I wanted to tackle this topic with you today. And my goal today is, obviously, I do want to talk about, the negative side, the ugly side of divorce. What warrants divorce, navigating through the tough times of divorce, but I also want to leave this episode with a lot of hope and the message of there is hope after divorce. There's a lot of beautiful things that can happen, and there's a lot of happiness to be had. And so I think people get stuck so much on the negative. I definitely want to leave this with that level of hope, and got some things to talk about in regards to that. But with that, how are you doing this week, Miss Jacquie?
I'm good. Thanks for having me back.
Good. And we got Daniel Anderson over there producing, who has made some awesome new upgrades to the studio. So I just want to say congratulations, man. Well, Miss Jacquie, I first want to dive into why you should get divorced. I want to preface that with myself nor Miss Jacquie are attorneys. This is not legal advice. As bad as it sucks, I can say this. If you're going through any divorce, get an attorney. Go pay that overpriced hourly rate. But it is you are navigating the break of the largest, most important contract you'll ever make in your life. And I will say that is important to have legal guidance. But so let's talk about when a marriage has reached that negative point and you're trying to make the decision of whether or not you should divorce someone or not. And so I'm going to kind of let you take off with that, and then I have a few thoughts on it, and we'll kind of hang out there for a moment.
Sure. Well, first let me start by saying marriage is freaking hard.
Yeah.
If you're navigating difficulties in your marriage, a lot of times what we're discovering is how selfish we are as human beings.
Yep.
No relationship will show us how selfish we are like marriage will. Because you are literally, when you said those promises to one another in front of your family, friends, a priest, and God, you are basically promising to prioritize this person over your personal comfort. You're prioritizing this person over money and materialism and other people. You're prioritizing this person above yourself and your own personal comfort. And we think, oh yeah, it's, we say these words, till death do us parts, I will honor and cherish you. We say all of that thinking it's going to be like it is right now forever until that addiction comes, until an illness comes, until job loss comes. Kids. And those things that, until we have to choose between my spouse and confronting my parents. Yeah. We your family of origin. So we think that we take those vows very lightly, unfortunately. And we think that marriage is going to be the way it is when we've been dating. But if that was the case, we wouldn't need marriage to be legal. Marriage is legal because sometimes it's the penalties of breaking those promises. They're the only thing that motivates us to stay in it and do the hard work. So marriage is hard. Don't expect it to be easy. And I think that's key, is expecting it to be difficult. And but when you marry someone, you are saying, I choose you. You're the last one I choose. I choose you last. You're the last one, and I will go through hell with you. I'm choosing the person that I am willing to go through hell with.
Yep.
And I'm expecting to go through hell because we probably will at some point.
Yeah.
So that's what marriage is. So changing the expectation of marriage is if you are divorced, or if you're getting divorced and you're going to get married again, realize the second time what you're promising when you stand in front of a priest and you make those promises, because chances are good that one or both people in the first marriage didn't really take those vows very seriously, didn't really understand what they were committing to. But so divorce, when is it justified to get divorced? Well, biblically, there's the Pauline exception.
Yeah.
Biblically,
I definitely want to start there.
Yeah.
That's where my thoughts were, because to me that's the
right,
most important.
Especially as Christians, we think that that God said you can't get divorced for anything. Yeah. Well, what if he's abusing you?
Correct.
God didn't put you in this marriage or create you to be abused. So abuse, abandonment, and affairs.
Yep.
Those are kind of the three big things. Is a sexual affair, an emotional affair, even, or abuse, verbal abuse, emotional abuse, financial abuse. There's a lot of ways that we think abuse is physical harm. Yeah. It's physical abuse. And while that's true, and you need to get out, sexual abuse, same thing, but there's also emotional abuse and verbal abuse. If your spouse is cutting you down and calling you names and denigrating you, that's abuse.
Yeah.
That's abuse, and that's not okay. It needs to be confronted. And abandonment. You're standing at that altar and you're saying, I will honor you and cherish you. And you think about honor and cherish, and what does that mean? If you think about holding a puppy or an infant, you're cherishing and loving that creature. That's the honor and cherish of your spouse, is I'm going to hold you delicately and honor you and care for you. And we don't do that. We just abandon each other emotionally and think you don't need anything. You don't need me. I need you to not need me. Well, that's not honor and cherishing.
You saying that about holding an infant just kind of made me think about something there. Biblically, one, God hates divorce, says in the Bible. Two, marriage is becoming one flesh. And so I think about what you just said, holding a baby. I think about my kids. There are very, very, very few people in this world that would ever break apart from their child, that would abandon their child, that would turn their back on their child, no matter what they've done. Through teenage years, adult years, except for a small, very sick group of people that could turn their back on their children, you're committed to that child. Your marriage is supposed to be even stronger than that, because you are actually one flesh. And I've heard various analogies that explain this. And one of my favorite, though, is in a movie the Love Dare is based on. Forget the name of it. But it talks about, puts a salt and a pepper shaker, glues it together. And no matter how you try and take them apart, you're going to break both people. And, that's so overlooked when people are considering divorce.
It's devastating.
Especially what makes me sick is the people who aren't wanting to divorce based on those biblical standards, which are healthy and correct. It's when they're just, I think the grass is greener over here, and I want to go do this. Right. Or, I don't agree with this that you're doing. I want to do this. You're making a decision to also destroy a big part of yourself, because not only are you going to break each other through that, you're going to break your family members, you're going to break your kids, the gravity of the situation is so overlooked, I feel like, especially in today's world, because we live, what I see a lot on social media and stuff is just all this, hey, if the grass is greener, go for it, Everybody's a narcissist now. Every relationship is toxic now. So there's just always somebody better that you could go be with, and you're going to have this ultimate happiness. false, because
It's hard.
you're about to break yourself
Mhm.
and that other person, and then you're going to take all those broken pieces into the next relationship and then into the next.
Yeah.
And but that just it really kills me that people, we have that commitment to our children, but the commitment to our spouse, which came before the children and is the only commitment God talks about, being one flesh,
Right.
we'll
And our
just walk away
kids,
from it.
right. And our kids, our job as parents is to put ourselves out of a job.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, we got to let them go when they hit 18 and they go off to college. It's harder on the parents than it's on the kid, but we got to let them do it. And then that 4 years is kind of a slow process of really letting go. And they've got to leave and cleave, go choose their own partner and marry and have their own kids and repeat the pattern. But you're still stuck with that spouse. Right.
Yep.
And that's how it's supposed to be. We marry our spouse first, and our spouse always has to come first. And our kids should know mama comes first or daddy comes first.
Yeah.
We will both sacrifice for you because we both love you, and we are agreeing to sacrifice for you. But there are times when we got to close the bedroom door and mom and daddy need some time.
Yeah.
When they need to see mom and daddy connecting on the one-on-one and going on those dates and prioritizing each other over the kids.
Absolutely.
They have to know they put each other before me, but they will both be there for me if I have a need.
Yeah.
And they'll both sacrifice for me, but not from each other. And I've seen that so many times when there's a break, the marriage is breaking down, so their needs aren't met, especially mama. Her mama has the emotional needs, daddy has the physical needs.
Mm-hmm.
That's how God created us, physical being versus emotional being. And it's a whole other subject, which one comes first. And God created it that way for a reason. But when a woman feels emotionally abandoned, she's going to often reach out to the kids and try to get that need met from kids. And it's beautiful. It works great when the kids are little until they hit those teenage years and they start naturally pulling away, which is normal. And mama's not liking that because, wait, you were filling dad's role. You were my emotional confidant. You were my best friend when your dad wasn't. And now you're pulling away from me and there's going to be a conflict. Well, yeah, it's going to be a problem. Kids can't fill the shoes of spouse.
Yeah.
Spouse has to come first.
Yeah, and talking about also the fact of, marriage is hard. We were actually talking about this before we came on camera. I love hearing from people who have been in the same marriage for 30 years, 40 years, 50 years. And like I said earlier, they all have the same thing to say about it. We battled through some of the most difficult times you can imagine. I'm part of a couple groups where I've got to hear some older gentlemen talk about that and ask them, hey, what is the key? And every one of them, the same thing. Don't ever give up.
Yep.
Don't care how bad it gets. Don't ever give up. And don't be afraid to get help.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah.
Look, I'm not, I can sound like a hypocrite sometimes. I feel like there was a time period in my life where I was totally against help. And I didn't want to get help. I didn't want to admit weaknesses and stuff. However, what I look at now, and I think about it like this, if you're sick, you go to the doctor. And, we can it goes down the rabbit hole of all mental health kind of thing. We look past going to therapists, going to counselors, going to our church for help. We don't want to admit those kind of things, but sometimes if your marriage is struggling, it's okay. You just need some help. You just need to go to the doctor and get some help. And even if you don't go to therapy, get some people around you. Let your closest friends know, as long as they're good influences.
I was going to say, closest friends will often tell you what you want to hear, and that's not
helpy
help.
Yeah, I could go down that road, but I'm not going to. Healthy people, if you have a couple within your family that has a long, my parents have been married 46 years, and it was not sunshine and rainbows.
That made them stronger. I'm
absolutely
sure. And it's those storms that you weather, and the bigger the storm, the more bonded you're going to be when you get through it.
Yep. And they went through some very difficult times before I was born, but they've talked to me about it, and the same time every time they've hit a low spot, we're not giving up. It's just not an option.
Yeah.
And so therefore
But
they
both
were
of
able to
them
work. Yes.
said that. And that's where the split happens, is when we do have those things that are going on, the affairs, the abuse, or the abandonment, and we do go get that help.
Yeah.
And we've only got one person who is willing to do anything different. Then we have to, and the other person is I'm not changing. I'm not changing. Well, and the other person is willing to be like a chameleon and a contortionist and change everything about themselves that they can change to make the other person happy, or to make the other person change too. And that's when, as a therapist and the helper, we kind of have to step back and help the person who's trying to change, do all the change, stop changing so much, stop trying so hard, back off, accept that they may not change. Back off, take care of you, and let that person whose needs are all being met, no matter what they do or don't do, and let them be uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then we see how willing and how committed they are to the relationship.
100%. Yeah. It definitely takes two. And I've seen it a lot. I've experienced it. But I want to jump into, I'm watching our time and stuff. I have different topics I'm wanting to hit. Let's talk about when that divorce happens, the 5 levels of grief, some of the things you're going to feel. Obviously, I have been through it the last 10 months. And I can kind of talk about how I've navigated it. But for those that don't know, I want to kind of, I know there's some people that listen to this podcast that are either in the beginning of the divorce process, they may be considering divorce and they're scared and they don't know what to expect. That's everybody's question, is what's it going to be like after those words are said or after those papers are filed. So I kind of want to go through that, what that looks like on an emotional level, because it is the same for everybody from what I've seen. It just depends on how you navigate it and how you handle it determines the result and all that.
Divorce is disenfranchised grief. There's a lot of things, a lot of losses that we experience, and a lot of things that we need to grieve in life that is invalidated by our culture, especially if a divorce where there's an abuser or there was an addiction, and the other person, the abuser or the addict or alcoholic or the abandoner or whatever, is not willing to change, and only you can decide when you are ready to give up hope that this person will change. When you finally make that decision, and then there's a divorce, everyone says, "Well, you're way better off. Why? I mean, you don't have to live with us anymore. You should be happy." No, that's disenfranchised grief. Disenfranchised grief is invalidated grief. It's grief that our culture doesn't believe you should have to, there should be any grief, but there is. Even there's a lot of things in life that is like that
For both parties.
For both parties, absolutely. Even like, I mean, I could give you a laundry list, but then we'd be chasing rabbits. But divorce is definitely one that that is very difficult to get. That's why we have support groups, a divorce support group.
Nobody walks away without getting hurt.
Right. Everyone is affected. Yeah. Everyone, both spouses, children, in-laws, the family, everyone is affected. So to think that you're not going to experience any kind of grief is going to keep you stuck. And guess what? It's going to come out at some point, probably in your next marriage. Yeah. You're just going to hold that beach ball underwater, pretending it doesn't exist until it's triggered. And then the next marriage is going to pop it back up because you got to feel the grief. And there's 5 stages of grief. The first stage is basically denial, or shock. It's like it's your brain's way of easing you into the reality, because it would be too much if we just faced it head on in one moment. So it's kind of a way our brain protects us. So the next stage, next stage, but there's the 3 next stages is anger, sadness, and bargaining, and you're gonna bounce around.
I was gonna see if you said that.
Yeah, you need to bounce around.
That 100% was my experience, and a few people I've talked to. You go through the denial, which I did, and that denial was, okay, we're getting a divorce, but this is going to change in a couple weeks.
Right.
And this isn't really going to happen. And it was kind of like, piece by piece chipped away, and then the papers got filed. And then, you're right, then it became this bounce back. Like, the thing that was very difficult for me and that drove me crazy was I could be completely fine. I could be at work, be completely fine, and then just like out of nowhere, the most extreme sadness would hit. 3 hours later, I am pissed off, ready to punch a brick wall. And then here we are back again a few hours later. And so it was just this roller coaster, which is why you see people go through. I mean, I did it. I lost 25 pounds in 3 weeks.
Did you experience the self-doubt and the what if I should have, shoulda, could have, had I done this?
I also put all the blame on myself.
Yeah, self-blame. Yeah,
I put all the blame on myself, and I've talked about it on here. I'm very open about it. So I don't mind saying it again today. I also went through the very dark stage that everything was my fault, that I failed my ex-wife, my children, my parents, my sisters, her family, to the point I put a gun in my mouth.
Yeah.
I was ready. I wrote the suicide letters. I was ready to end my life because I didn't feel like I deserved to keep going because I put all the blame on myself and
took all the guilt.
Yeah, so that was all kind of part of that. It was like denied it and then accepted that it was happening, but I was so sad, angry, and disappointed in myself. And being somebody that is a big problem solver, most of my adult life has been spent in careers where I'm the one being called to solve the problem. And here I am.
You're navigating by yourself.
My family that I was supposed to take care more than anybody has failed. So I went down that really dark rabbit hole for a little bit. But the hardest part to me was that I literally felt like a ping pong ball, just back and forth. Never knew day to day what emotion I was going to feel every hour. Yeah. And that's hard, and I say that not to scare people, but to warn you, and to say that it's okay. It's normal.
It's normal, and it's actually healthy to bounce around, because what you don't want is to get stuck in any one of those. If you get into the sadness and you get stuck in sadness, you're going to fall into depression.
Yep.
If you get stuck in anger, then it's going to turn into rage, and it's going to be destructive. But the bargaining, you don't want to get stuck in bargaining either, which is the guilt. And the guilt is just a feeling, and that's a normal feeling. It's part of the bargaining stage. It's a normal feeling, but the narrative that you attach to that feeling is what has to be guarded, and that's why we need safe people. We need safe people to help us to validate our sadness and cry with us and not try to fix it, to help us find healthy ways to express the anger and help us get the anger out in safe, healthy ways, and to also guard the narrative around the guilt that you're going to feel, because there will be. That's just part of the stage. But navigating is that the beliefs that you attach to that feeling of guilt has to be guarded, and that's why we need safe people to go through this process with, to help it. I get what you feel that way, and and this is a normal stage of grief. It's normal to have those thoughts. They're not true. Don't let them stick.
Yeah.
But I get that there's a part of you that believes that, because it's trying to make sense of the feeling.
Yeah. And you say that, I want to say something real quick on that idea of you want safe people around you. And this is a lesson I learned very quickly out the gate. It's kind of advice to people going through a divorce. Also, if you're the family member or a friend of somebody going through a divorce, it is such a unique thing to experience. One of the things that drove me crazy was it seemed like everybody had advice. People who've never been divorced had advice on what you should do, what you should feel, all that. I have a few people in my life that were the ones that I quickly figured out I would turn to. And it was, some of the middle of the night, 2, 3 in the morning, crying my eyes out on the phone with them, and they would just sit there for as long as I needed. They didn't tell me what to do. They didn't tell me how to feel. They didn't tell me what I should have done, what she should have done. They were just there, as I say, to sit in the crap with you and just
Creating
be
the safe
there.
space.
And I got so turned off by people that were wanting to, their intentions were good, but I equate it to the idea of like, take a military member who's gone overseas and what they have to do over there. And they come back, they got PTSD really bad. And they got some civilian who's never even been in a fist fight, telling them how they should navigate that.
Right.
That's not who you want to be talking to. So the best, in my experience, people who have navigated divorce previously, they know how you're actually feeling.
Right.
It's like, same reason why most drug rehab places are people who have battled addiction. That connection of knowing how you're feeling cannot be, it's totally different than someone dying. Me and a friend of mine talked about that shortly after my divorce, was that it was like a death, but worse.
Yeah.
Because a death, they're gone, you grieve, you move on. A divorce is a death, but now you still got to talk to them every week.
If you have kids.
If you have kids,
yeah.
You got to talk to them.
They're not ever going to be
You got to
totally out of
see
your life.
them. Yeah, and so it's like this death that is essentially just
right.
hits you every week or two.
It's kind of analogous to like addiction. With drugs and alcohol, people who are in recovery have accepted that I just have to completely terminate my relationship with drugs and alcohol. There's no first drink. There is no just going to have a little bit. It's a complete cutoff. It's a death. I am dying to this substance. Versus people who have a food addiction or even a sex addiction if you're married. Those are things you have to continue to have a relationship with this thing.
Yeah.
And you have to figure out how to navigate it so it doesn't control you. But you can choose when to have a relationship with it and when not to. But doing that so that it doesn't hurt you. And that's kind of like divorce versus death.
Yeah.
Death is just, you're dying to it. It doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. It's not a part of your life.
Yeah.
With addiction or with, death of a loved one. But divorce, you have to navigate it. You got to have a relationship. If you have children, you will always be, if weddings, funerals, the college, kids go off to college, kids have grandkids. You're going holidays. You're gonna have to figure out how to navigate life with this person.
Yeah. And so with saying that, obviously I made a decision after my divorce that I knew I had done a lot of things wrong. Like, I'm a very, very imperfect human being, a very imperfect husband. And so I had already, before the divorce, been thinking about, there were things I wanted to work on about myself. And so I jumped in. I talk about it all the time. I'm a big proponent. 2 weeks after my divorce was my first time going into therapy. And for me, I would have rather gone and gotten in a gunfight that day than to have to go into I literally called a friend of mine who was a cop and who attends therapy, and I called him. I told him, I said, dude, I'm more nervous right now going to this than I would be if we were headed to a gunfight. And he was like, yep. He was like, just get ready. Yeah. But it was the best thing I ever did. So for the last 10 months, and I started out, I was going 2 days a week. And then after a few months, dropped down to 1 day a week. And now I go every 2 weeks, or I can call him up and get in there if I need to. I say all that because I think it's very, very, very important. If you're going through a divorce, no matter what the situation is, you're both to blame to a degree. Now, obviously, and I say that, some people are probably like, oh, no. If it's abusive, you were codependent long enough to allow it to get there.
Right.
If it was an affair, you know what? Maybe you left a void in them that they fulfilled.
Abandonment, probably, yeah.
But either way, we all make mistakes. And so I immediately took on navigating my divorce, and I looked at it as, okay, I really dislike all these things about myself. And I wish I wouldn't have made all these mistakes. So my job now is to make sure I don't do this again. And
Don't
so,
repeat it.
so I jumped in like, I will say this with 100% confidence. And it's all also thank God, because he's made a big change in me. I am nothing that I was a year ago. That's kind of some of the stuff that we're going to jump into in a few minutes, as far as it can be really good. It sucks. I'm going to tell you, I've been through 2 back surgeries. I've been through multiple careers. I've been through financial bottom of the barrel. I've been through a lot of bad crap. I've lost people in my life. There's nothing compares to how bad divorce sucks. It's one of the worst things you'll ever go through. But the growth that can come out of it can be really, really amazing. If you'll put in the work.
Yeah.
If you'll acknowledge that there's work to be done, and you'll seek out the help, and you'll actively work on it. I promise you this. If you walk away from a divorce, no matter which side you're on, and you just walk away from it and walk into something else without acknowledging the errors and working on them and being in a healthy, get ready, because you'll get divorced again, most likely.
You're just going to repeat the pattern. It's
Yeah.
going to be a pattern. That's the part of what I do with when I'm working with someone who's been divorced or going through divorce is, there's the grief. You absolutely just need to validate the grief, and the anger is normal. The guilt is normal. The sadness is normal. And going and just trying to make sure they don't get stuck in them.
Yep.
In any one of those stages. But once they are ready to move on, and it's very important as a professional to help them look at what was your part in it. When were those red flags that you ignored? Where were the red flags? And they start realizing, you know what? We dated for like 7 years and he didn't even want to get married. And I'm like, well, there was your first red flag.
Yeah.
And accepting that maybe you should have walked away before you even got married. Yeah. But there was some part of you that was that codependent part of you that just needed to be loved so badly. You didn't allow yourself. You didn't value yourself enough to walk away from someone who didn't prioritize you and didn't value you. So looking at the past and where did this first start to go wrong? And sometimes it's before you even got married, and just being honest with yourself about that. And then walking with them as they begin that dating process and, okay, well, where are the red flags? And helping them see what they come in and, well, this is what happened and this is what he's saying and this is what he's done or what she's doing. And I'm like, from that outsider looking in, from that, the no rose-colored glasses, I'm like, okay, so this is like the third time you've mentioned this. And how are you handling that? And helping them recognize when it's the right time to give up on that relationship and keep looking.
Yeah. Yeah, and that, I say that, I'm sitting here laughing a little bit because, when I started therapy, in my mind, coming out of a divorce, where I was at and all that, I thought, okay, I'm going to go to therapy. I'm going to spend an hour twice a week probably talking about my ex-wife, talking about my divorce. And then after I get past this, I'll be done with therapy. And it was like, I think probably it took 3 to 5 visits to like really kind of download my life with him, download everything about my marriage, my divorce, and him get to know me well enough. And then we really didn't talk about the divorce very much. Mm-hmm. It was like we just centered in on me. Now, it obviously, it was 10 years of my life, so it does take up a lot. But, I quickly realized with him in therapy that, okay, this is not about justifying. This is not about blame. This is not about who did what wrong, right, and different. This is about me. This is about how do I become the most healthy man I can be. And it's also a marathon.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that was really hard for me. Yeah. It's really hard for me now because I'm very, very, I've talked about it, I think with you too, I'm very actionable. Whatever the situation is, and I equate it to my career, whatever the situation is, let's fight it, let's attack it, let's get it over with. And so this, having to work on stuff that possibly may take years
Yeah.
to change within me.
We're always a work in progress.
Yep.
Until we're on the other side of grace, completely sanctified, we're always going to have
Yep.
room to grow if you're willing to do that work.
Yes. So that's another kind of high point I wanted to put out there for people who are about to be enter into this is it's not quick. There's no pill to take. Now there is medication out there and I take it for anxiety and different stuff. I support that 100%. And you might need it going through this. But healing and working on yourself is a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah.
And for very type A people like myself, that was very difficult for me to accept.
Not very patient.
Absolutely not.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
Patience is not something that
No.
people who know me would describe.
We're both
I will say
Enneagrammers.
this. I have prayed and prayed and prayed for a few things over the last 10, 11 months now, and that's, patience, kindness, gentleness, compassion, empathy, a lot of stuff that I didn't have a lot of. And I am a work in progress. Don't get me wrong. I promise. Just yesterday, I probably did something that completely is the opposite of one of those. But the overall change in me is so drastic. Because I've read books around that. I've talked about it in therapy. I've listened to podcasts about it. I've prayed about it. I've read God's word about it. I've been intentional in how can I be a better man, knowing that these are my weaknesses. And some of those weaknesses I didn't know I had until the therapy side of it. And then, I'm sitting here like mad about somebody or something, and the way y'all do it, after you get done dumping it on y'all, you're like, so what was your part in that? And it's like,
so what are you gonna do about it?
Yeah. Hold on, I thought we were blaming somebody else. And so that's something.
Yeah.
That's something that's funny, but it's a work, and it's awesome though seeing yourself heal. For those around you, because I've had different people tell me this, they see a big difference in me. It's been awesome for them. So
healing requires feeling, though.
Yeah.
And if you think that you're going to get through the process without having to feel the grief, then you're really lying to yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go through it without feeling the grief, but guess what? You're just going to vomit that out on your next relationship.
Yeah.
It's not going to go away just because we ignore it. And you just can't have a loss that big in your life, even if it's just the loss of what should have been.
Yeah.
Maybe I never really loved him anyway, or he never loved me anyway, or she never loved me, and I never loved her. Okay, but you should have. Yeah. It's the loss of what should have been. So that was worthy of grieving. And you cannot get through divorce without grief.
Yeah.
And the kids too.
I've had people say, because it's so true, you're grieving the past, you're grieving the present, and you're grieving the future that you had planned. And, for me, one of the things that you'll experience that is very hard is what was real and what wasn't. That was a hard hurdle for me to get over. What in our marriage was good, what was bad, what was real, what was fake. And that's hard. So you grieve that, and then you grieve the moment that you're in. Now you've lost your spouse, you're not seeing your kids, depending on y'all's arrangement. That's huge. I will say that. Like, that was where my anger was centered around, that we'll talk about. But then, you're grieving all the plans you had in the future. Everything, everything in my life was based around my ex-wife, with the idea of her being in every one of those future thoughts. So that it's a weird complex.
And it's really difficult to hold on to hope.
Yes.
That the future can still be redeemed and that you can still find joy and peace and happiness and find the perfect person. It's very difficult to hold on to that while you're grieving.
Extremely hard.
You kind of have to go through the grief first.
You do.
And then when you get into that fifth stage of grief, which is acceptance, is when you stop fighting the reality. It doesn't mean you have to like it. It just means you stop fighting the reality, and then you can start grabbing onto hope.
Absolutely. Yeah, and man, I will tell you what I went through. pulled my truck over on the side of the road because I was crying so hard. I've gone out in the middle of a field and prayed and screamed to the top of my lungs with God. I've gone and hung out with friends to get my mind off of it. I've gone to the gym. Everyone will grieve different. Everyone has their way. With my backgrounds, spent a lot of time at the gun range. I hit the punching bag. I hit the gym. But I also went and I laid face down in the middle of a field and screamed and cussed with God until I was sick. You have to get it out. It's like a poison. Mm-hmm. It's like a poison that if you do not release it, it just grows and grows and grows. It's literally like being sick. If you try not to vomit, you're still going to vomit at some point.
Yeah. It's like a cancer. It's like a cancer that'll just eventually, it'll come out and you can't ignore it forever. And grief it's funny how our biggest fear is grief. We do not want to feel that discomfort of grief. We don't want to feel the sadness or the anger or the guilt. We don't want to feel any of that. Yeah. So we just stay stuck in denial and try to justify and rationalize why we don't feel sad or why we don't, whatever. We don't want to have to feel it, but it doesn't go away. And when I was working in a drug and alcohol treatment center, so my husband is in recovery and he had a big trauma at 10. So naively went into this job or into this treatment center thinking they all have trauma, right? They all have, it's like big T trauma. What I discovered is so many of them had unresolved grief. They just needed to face the grief. Yeah. And it was painful for them, but they were in an environment where they could feel heard and seen and valued and not drink. Yeah. But they were able to work through the pain underneath the addiction. And a lot of times grief is so painful, the bigger the loss too. It's so painful. It will easily turn into an addiction. You cannot ignore the grief forever. It will come out. And
so I've talked about it on here. I narrowly escaped that. And I'm honest about it. I had a stint where I had like a 16-day actually it wasn't little, it was bad. I had like a 16-day binge where I couldn't handle it anymore. I'll be completely frank. I used to be very, very negative and against any kind of medications. And so I hadn't seen a doctor for that yet. I hadn't really got into therapy where therapy was helping, which
takes
small
time.
Side note, just for people to know, if you have not done therapy, you're not going to be healed after one session. The first 5 are going to be just getting to know you so they can work on you.
It takes time.
So anyways, I self-medicated. I couldn't sleep. I was having panic attacks. I was having all kind of stuff. And so I went down that road, and my experience of going down that road really showed me, and it gave me a lot of empathy for how easy. Because, I could totally see how someone could stay stuck in that grief and that anger and self-medicate like that, and it just be that ugly rabbit hole all the way down the hole. I totally could see how that could go. And so, with that, you have to protect yourself. You have to, it's kind of like realizing, okay, I'm about to enter into war. I'm about to enter into a really bad thing. If I'm not conscious about how I'm going to fight this, I can easily slip into some bad stuff. Yeah. And it may not be alcohol. It may not be drugs. It may be sex. It may be shutting everybody out of your world and just being so pissed off.
It's rage.
That you can't function. And so it's so important to fight this battle, to go through it consciously, in my opinion. And because you're also your worst enemy through it, I learned. You kind of get to dictate how long you stay in these pockets of grief based on what you do to help yourself.
Right. And it's really important to have those safe people. When you're getting ready to go to war.
Oh, yeah.
And you're getting ready to realize, okay, the marriage is ending. I'm going to go through some stages. And choosing wisely who you surround yourself with to take that journey with. And if it's someone that can't handle your sadness, that's not a safe person.
Yeah.
Well intended though they are, they're not comfortable enough with their own grief to share in yours or to validate yours and sit in yours. Find people who are comfortable. That's why therapists they can sit in the grief with you. When you're angry, people that'll help you find a healthy way to go to the gun range. We're going to get this anger out and help you find healthy ways to express your anger. And people who can help you reframe the narrative when you start feeling guilty. Yeah. And the guilt starts to come in. Okay, I get that you're feeling it. I can see where you would think that. Not true, but I get that you might be, I can see where you might be thinking that. So it's really important who you surround yourself with.
When you talk about having that safe friend that can sit in it with you, but also like keep you centered. I have a best friend of mine that he's closer to me than anybody in this world, and I cannot tell you probably the number of times of me being on the phone with him just crying because he don't live here, so he couldn't get to me all the time, crying my eyes out, trying to blame myself. Because that's something else I learned. It's an uncontrolled feeling also. You're not in control of anything. You're not getting to make your own decisions. You're not getting to make decisions about your children even. And, as a parent, that's like, and then as a dad, like, oh, I can't do that. No. And so I'd be on the phone with him just, pouring out, I should have done this. I should have done that. I deserve this. And it was never aggressive. It was just always, he was like, man, listen. It's not true. You're better than that. Yeah, you made a mistake. I've made a bunch of mistakes in my it was just, he was my go-to, honestly, for when I was down like that, because I didn't want, I knew, I was like, I don't want people bashing my ex-wife. I don't want people to just agree with me. That's not healthy. That's not going to help you heal, And so I made it a point to get people around me that would support me, call me on my BS, and also respect her, my kids, everything, and not lead me down a path that could be more unhealthy for them. Right. So.
I think, we go back to what are the reasons to get divorced? And I want to be clear that I don't think that if there's been abandonment, adultery, or abuse, you should get divorced, period, the end. I think when those things are happening and there's the person who's inflicting that pain is not willing to change.
Agree 100%.
That is when, and I would argue that we have to also look at has there been detachment? Have you confronted this person in a healthy way? Have you allowed this person to be uncomfortable in the consequences of abuse, affair, or abandonment? Yeah. Because have they gotten the message that this isn't okay? And is there a consequence for this? Has there been a constructive separation? Constructive separation is not, well, I'm going to move out, but I'm still going to cook for you and do your laundry and have sex with you. That's not a constructive separation. The message he's getting is that what he's doing is fine. There is no problem. So the constructive separation says, I'm committed to the marriage, but I'm not going to live like this. And the affair, the abuse, or the abandonment is not okay anymore. And I want you to get some help. Yeah. And then you wait and you see if they get that help, and you see if they start changing, and you see if they're willing to be accountable to someone. And then you start dating again, and you see if the change is real. But if they don't even care enough to go get help, and you are allowing them to feel the discomfort of your distance, that's when you got to look at, is it time to end this relationship? Yeah. And then again, look at when was the red sign? When were the warning flags? Why did I get into a relationship with someone who is not willing to sacrifice and change? Was I lying to myself about this person's commitment?
Yeah, and 100% on the same page with you in that I hate divorce. I'm disgusted by it. I don't ever want anybody to get divorced. There are situations, like you said, it takes two. If both aren't willing to work on it, fix it. And I think anything's repairable. Some people don't think that. I think anything is repairable if you're both willing to get the right help, put the time in, and do the work. It's not going to be easy, but I personally know some people that you would never think they could have repaired, and they did.
I'd be one of them.
Yeah, yeah. Yours is a great story too,
I'd be one of them.
and so absolutely. But in that moment where you cannot do it on your own, it's like I think about it's like trying to drive a car with only two wheels on it. It ain't gonna work. Don't care how you do it. It ain't gonna work. Something else that I thought of while you were talking about that, the whole separation thing. And some people may not realize or understand, in Mississippi, which is where we are, when you file, once you file that at-fault divorce or irreconcilable, either one, once it is filed, it is 60 days before the judge reviews everything and signs off on it for you to be divorced. Irreconcilable, you're not going into court, you're back and forth. There's so many things to navigate. Where I'm going with this is I am thankful that through mine, things happen in stages with me and my ex-wife. Bank accounts were separated right off the bat. She got a rental house. I got an apartment. Then we navigated, agreements between different stuff. We both knew we want to do 50-50. And so day one, before any legal paperwork were in place, I guess we have the maturity maybe or the respect for one another. We enacted doing 50-50 custody on our own. Before any papers were signed, we started doing it. And so where I'm going with that is I've seen some cases where a couple says, okay, we're going to get divorced, this situation. They're still living in the same house. They still got the same bank accounts. They're sleeping in separate rooms, trying to hide it from the kids. And then the papers get signed and a bomb goes off. Because now everything happens instantaneously. And to me, that would be horrible. It was like grieving pieces, when we had to, and it's little things that you don't think about, but it was like, having to go and separate phone accounts, bank accounts, life insurance, all these things that are combined that yet, luckily, we kind of did things a little piece at a time to where it was a little easier to absorb. It wasn't as traumatic as, oh crap, I got to go do all this is about to happen this week. They're going to move out. And, we immediately, which we have a 6-year-old and a 2-year-old. 2-year-old don't know what's going on. 6-year-old, we immediately started separating time with him. That is advice I would give people is don't sit there and wait till all the papers are signed to figure out how to separate, because it is an overwhelming. If you've had a life together longer than a year, you're substantially tied together. And so don't wait till the last minute to break all that. Yeah. Do it in pieces. Yeah. Don't play life when life ain't actually happening.
The financial break and all those other things are certainly things that that come with divorce. But what I would also encourage is a constructive separation before the divorce happens.
Yeah.
Go ahead and separate. Get your own residence. Respect each other's boundaries in their front. You don't just get to walk into each other's front door.
Absolutely.
Don't keep having sex as if you were dating with benefits.
Yep.
But go to therapy, and both of you work on your own stuff and see if it can be fixed before the divorce.
Yeah.
And go ahead and have when you're living separately, go ahead and create a custody, quote unquote, custody schedule. Get a calendar out. When are the kids gonna be with you? When are they gonna be with me during the separation?
100%.
And let the kids start getting used to 2 different residences before decision is fully made. We cannot work this out.
Yeah.
sometimes being separated and both people being willing to go to counseling and working on their stuff during the separation, it's possible to fix it.
That's
if
why
both
the
pieces-
60-day period is part of the law.
But we don't do it right. We don't do constructive
That's what I'm
separation.
saying.
We continue to have the benefits of marriage and live like we're married,
Yeah.
and not really work on anything. And that's not constructive separation.
No.
It's
The
not,
whole point of the 60 days is you have 60 days. At any moment, either one of you can pull that before it gets to the judge. That's your time to be getting therapy. I think everybody
Yep.
should be doing that. Be getting therapy individually. And it's also your time to start having to make those decisions, because those decisions may be when you go, holy smokes, like, maybe we should put a little effort into saving this before we just.
Right. Because you start having to look at what are those decisions we're going to have to make.
Yeah.
Oh, crap, I didn't think about that. This is a bigger deal than I thought. And then maybe I'll work a little harder.
Yeah.
The constructive separation is an opportunity to fix the marriage that everyone should consider before they just decide to get divorced. Because it can be an opportunity to heal and grow as individuals, and then ultimately create a new marriage if both people are willing to do that hard work. When I was separated, when I left my husband, because it was just, the rage was, I can't live with this anymore. And I was naive to think that it wasn't affecting our kid.
Yeah.
You know, our kids. It was. We didn't realize it. Kids are smarter than we think. I just don't want to. We often will use the kids as an excuse to not get divorced. I'm like, no, that's a cop-out. Your kids know that they are not in a loving, nurturing environment where mom and dad are prioritizing each other and value each other. They know that. The absence of divorce is not is not creating a healthy environment for them. So when I left, I had to respect his boundaries, and I said, I'm not just going to come over to this, even though it felt like, it's my house.
Yeah.
We all live there as a family, but I am going to knock on the door when I come over to see the children. And here's when I'm going to come over and see the children.
Yes.
I will let you know when I'm coming. And here's when you can see the kids, but you're not welcome at this house that I'm staying in, because it's my boundary. I'll meet you at the McDonald's and we'll swap kids. We'll swap the kids out. And we had the financial thing didn't really get separated because I wasn't ready for divorce. And as long as he was willing to get help, and as long as he was willing to go to individual therapy every week, and we go to couples therapy every week, as long as he's willing to do that, I wouldn't file for divorce. That was the agreement, because at least I saw him working, and we were working towards something. But that was also an opportunity for me to focus on myself in that time. Instead of trying to fix or change him, I started focusing on my own stuff and fixing myself and doing my own individual therapy. So I was able to get healthier, and he was working on himself, and he was getting healthier. And ultimately, we didn't have to separate the finances and do all those things you described. Yeah. But we did separate residences, and we did have a custody schedule unofficially. Yeah. Because it's kind of like we're practicing this is what it's going to be like if we get divorced. If you stop doing the work, this is what it's going to be like permanently. Yeah. And I didn't have sex with him. And he didn't cook for him. I didn't do his laundry. And he didn't meet my needs either. I had to go find a place to get my own needs met. Yeah. But that's what divorce is.
100%. No, I love that. So we're coming up on an hour. So I think we've tackled, the 5 stages of grief. We've talked a lot about what some of the hard times are going to be. I'm not even going to try to jump into talking about the kids. We may have to do a whole
nother session.
We may have to do a whole nother episode on that. I will, on the note of kids through divorce, I will say this, because I've been very diligent about this. I'm very thankful for an ex-wife that has done the same. Do not badmouth your spouse, your ex-spouse, in front of your children. They need to know they have a great mother. Mine do. I tell them all the time. They have a wonderful mother that loves them dearly, and a dad. And that is the only message they need. Yeah. Do not weaponize your children. If you do, you're the scum of the earth.
It's such a common mistake, and that's what we do when we don't have safe people to navigate that journey with. This goes back to what we were saying earlier. You've got to have those safe people in place that you can vent to, you can get angry with, you can cry with, and you can share that journey with safe people. Your children are not your safe people, ever. They are not those people, because that's going to put a heavy burden on a very young child to now join with one parent against another, and triangulating your children is never healthy for the children. It's just not.
And I do want to say this, because I said in the beginning, I wanted today to also be hopeful. And so personally, one of the things that I never thought would happen, and without working on myself, now I've dated, I've gone out, all that, but without putting the work in, and without a lot of prayer, and putting myself in the position to be ready to receive something else, I never in my life thought I'd be able to feel anything for somebody again. And that's completely false. I'm extremely blessed and lucky right now that I have somebody in my life that means a ton to me, that we are building a very healthy relationship. And it comes from everything you and I have talked about in these episodes of, I did not even know until this person that it was possible to talk to somebody at the level that we do, and to get to know somebody. And it all comes from a lot of the stuff we've talked about, of being intentional, being very, very vulnerable, being very open, being very prayerful. And if you'll do those things, if you'll work on yourself, if you'll seek God through it all, and then you'll learn from your mistakes and not make them again, it's really amazing what you could end up in. And that's where I've ended up. Mm-hmm. And so I hope that gives some people some hope, is that, and that's the girl that I'm blessed with now, and seeing, we talked about that this week, is I wanted to mention that because she's in a similar situation, post-divorce, and there is hope in it. You will be able to feel again. You will be able to smile again. You will be able to be happy and laugh. And it's a once you hit that level of acceptance, all those feelings that you haven't felt for a while will start coming back, if you do the work.
Yeah, which means you're probably going to have to do something different the second time around.
Absolutely.
What do you want to do differently this time, and what discernment do you need this time that you didn't use the first time? And it's, if you're getting involved and you're dating the people that you're dating, you should be honest with that person about, this was my part in my divorce. And that earns trust. That tells them that you are willing to take responsibility for yourself and change and learn and grow. If that person is getting out of divorce, what is their part in it? Are they willing to admit, acknowledge, and face their part in it? Have they done that work? Because if you're getting involved with somebody who's been divorced, and they haven't done that work, it's going to fall apart.
Yep. And I will say we communicate in a way I didn't even know existed. And we've been very transparent about all the mistakes I made, all the mistakes she's made, and how we can help one another to better ourselves and not make those mistakes and grow. And without that, then it would not be a relationship. It would just be, there's a big difference in going on dates and then actually, for the first time, having the ability to feel and the ability to open up to somebody. And it's out there. Don't think it's not. Don't think that you'll never be able to feel anything, love anything again. You will. It just takes a little bit of time, takes a lot of effort, takes a lot of work, and then you'll be able to achieve it. So that's what I really want people to know, is it is ugly. It does suck. But I promise you, it really does get better. And you can come out of it on the other end a much, much better individual. And that's what I've done. And so I hope that my path of doing it, my advice, I hope it helps some other people. I'm sure there's dozens of things I could have done better. And not all my advice is sound, but it's a unique process. It is a unique process to each individual, and nobody understands your emotions other than you. And it's something that needs professional help also.
Yeah, especially if you don't understand your own emotions.
Exactly.
Because
Yep.
if you don't understand your own emotions, you're not ready to get into a deep relationship, another serious
Exactly.
relationship.
So, well, Miss Jacquie, I have enjoyed this. It has been, I've gotten a lot of feedback. I want you to know that, because obviously I have people messaging me, comments, different stuff. It has been very helpful, very supportive to some people that are going through divorce, or that are entering into it, or that are either a couple years removed from it and have just been stuck trying to get past it. I've been told that these episodes have helped them a lot. And so I just want to say thank you for taking the time to come on here, to be open about you and your husbands. I know that's, people don't realize it's not easy to put your personal business out on these platforms. Some of these I've had some stuff on TikTok that 120,000 people have seen, and that's scary. That's scary to think that we are sharing, but that's also it says a lot about you. It says a lot about your husband that y'all are willing to let that be out there, because it does help other people.
I'm glad. Thank you.
So
thanks for having me. I've enjoyed it.
I'm sure I got some other stuff coming up I'm probably going to have you back for. So I definitely want to continue to tackle some other stuff around therapy, mental health, and especially the codependency that I know you have a lot. So we may tackle some of that. But
okay. Well, I am. I admire your courage to share your story.
I appreciate it.
And to share your pain with the world, because it will help others. That's what we're called to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So, all right, Miss Jacquie, thank you. Everybody, I hope y'all have a great day.